And we also have Ruth Balunga, who is counsel at DLA Piper Africa in Senegal. Now, I'd like to go ahead and get started with the moderated discussion. I believe we have one more panelist that will be joining us in a few minutes. So first, I'd just like each panelist to please introduce yourself. Also, please describe your physical appearance for those with visual impairments, and tell us a little bit more about your work on advancing digital inclusion for persons with disabilities. And I'll start with Awoke.
Thank you very much, Morgan, and thank you very much, CIPESA, for facilitating the chance to speak about strengthening disability information technology accessibility for persons with disabilities. I am Awok Adanyo. I am from Ethiopia. I work and volunteer with Together Civil Society Organization, which works. Okay, so thank you very much once again, and let me make myself accessible for persons with visual impairment. So my color is like a little bit browny. I wear white shirt and black trouser. So thank you very much. The organization that I belong to works with one of the most sensitive area of like strengthening ICT accessibility for persons with visual impairment in Ethiopia. So together we do some information communication technology training for persons with visual impairment for a year period, and we want to avoid the problem of like getting unemployed for persons with visual impairment due to the problem that the government has a law that any person with visual impairment had to be with an assistant to get him employed. So to avoid that, whenever we are like empowering them through the ICT training, they wouldn't have been required to have an assistant. So we do also some on-the-job training for those ICT trained persons with visual impairment. There are some scholarship and training services for them. There is also a job inclusion program component that we are doing with the government and the private sector. We do some capacity building training for them and try to connect with government and non-governmental organizations and hiring private companies. So there is also another major task that we do for the empowerment of persons with disabilities. That's the advocacy section. We do dinner in the dark awareness raising campaign among high-level officials, business people, and those community leaders. And there is also another groundbreaking and major, powerful advocacy campaign that we call Hear the Blind Spot. It's like a data sonification program that we use data through music, and we try to campaign our programs and inclusion of persons with disabilities through a data sonification mechanism. And if you want to hear more about the data sonification, please join me my tomorrow session there in the main conference room. So these are some of the tasks that we do in together.
Great, thank you so much, Awoke. And if I could ask for a second microphone. Thank you. While we go through the introductions, that would be great. Thank you. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Kekeli Akuno, and I'm Ghanaian. And let me describe myself for my visually impaired colleagues. So I'm not too tall, and I'm not too short. And let's say dark brown, have on braids, dark purple braids, yes. I'm a member of Ghana Blind Union, and I'm also a volunteer with Inclusive Tech Group. I'm also the Vice President for Campus Association of Students with Special Needs on University of Ghana campus, and I'm a final year student of the University of Ghana. So I'll talk about the Inclusive Tech Group. So what we do at Inclusive Tech Group is to advocate for inclusion in the tech space in terms of website developers, software designers, and anything tech. And then we also help to bring about assistive technology solutions. So we have a yearly hackathon we have named Disability Inclusive Hackathon, where we bring together persons with disability and persons without disability to bring about an innovative tool that will make the life of persons with disability easier. Thank you. I also want to appreciate CIPESA for this opportunity given to me to also share my ideas and also to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shara. And if anyone would like the translation into French, please raise your hand and someone will come with a headphone set for you. Okay, thank you. Lynette?
Thank you, Morgan. My name is Lynette Onyango. I'm a senior legal counsel at the Thomson Reuters Foundation. Brief description of myself. I am 5 feet, 8.5 inches. The 0.5 is very important. Today, I am not just the hair, actual height. I'm wearing a yellow blouse and black trousers for the benefit of those with visual impairment. At the Thomson Reuters Foundation, we have a number of global initiatives that support non-profit organizations, social enterprises, and independent media outlets. In terms of what we are doing to support the disability space, we work with non-profits, and we have worked with non-profits in the past to support legal research in this area to identify the gaps across the continent when it comes to accessibility of ICT technologies for persons with disabilities.
Thank you, Lynette. Ruth?
Hi everybody, my name is Ruth Balunga. I'm counsel at DLA Piper Africa, in Quebec. And how tall I am and what weight I'm average. And I'm wearing a colorful wax demure dress. Actually, my involvement in the rights of people with disability is more theoretic than practical. It is in analyzing and studying the laws, the regulations that are applicable to persons with disabilities and their accessibility to ICTs. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do know that our final panelist has just joined us. So last but not least, I'd like to introduce Dr. Basula, who is a board member of CIPESA. Dr. Basula, thank you so much for joining us. We're just having some brief introductions. So if you'd like to briefly introduce yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. As rightly mentioned my name, I'm surprised that you almost mentioned it 100% correct. Abdul Basura is my name. I'm a board member of CIPESA, but then I also earn a living as a lecturer in Uganda, in a university called Chambogo University. This university has been in existence for about 21 years now. There were 3 institutions that were merged into that university, and we have the best department or faculty for disability and rehabilitation in the country. And we also get a lot of international students coming to study disability and the issues of special needs. I am 1 meter and 62 centimeters. That is not very tall and probably not very short, somewhere medium. I have a tummy, not so protruding, but it's there. And I think one more imagination you may have of me is that I have some functional vision. I can see the different colors in this room, but again, I cannot read print. And I cannot know whether somebody is beautiful or not. But I can see the outline of a person.
Thank you, Dr.
I think that's
Basula.
good enough.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to dive right into some of the conversations we had yesterday during our Day Zero event. So I'd next like to ask the panelists to please tell us a little bit more about the key barriers that you see when it comes to fostering more accessible and inclusive digital spaces for persons with disabilities. And maybe I'll ask Awoke to start, and then we can go down the line. Thank you.
So thank you again, Morgan. I will be reverting the question to you participants to think of what your feeling will be. So have you ever thought of a situation that your classmate getting out of the school because the courses that have been given to us are not inaccessible to them? Have you ever thought of that? Maybe your friends, your classmates getting out of the school because the course that has been given by the school or the curriculum that's inaccessible to them. So this is the situation in Ethiopia. You might have your perspective, you might have your understanding in your country, but this is the hard reality that persons with visual impairment in Ethiopia are experiencing in. So they are getting out of the school. They are getting out of the class because the courses are inaccessible, especially when it comes to these things are complicating the problem that persons with disabilities are experiencing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Awoke. Test, can you hear me? Okay, hopefully everyone can still hear me. And again, if you need the French translation, please raise your hand and someone will come to you with a headset. Thank you. Great. So, Awoke, I really appreciate what you mentioned about accessibility, but also affordability when it comes to making sure that digital technologies are inclusive and accessible for everyone. Sarah?
Okay, thank you. I would like to build on what he said. So he was talking about availability, accessibility, and affordability. Again, also a barrier, because as a visually impaired individual, before you are able to use screen reader software, especially on the laptop or the personal computer, you need to undergo training, because you need to identify the keyboard, have keyboard shortcuts. Person with disability, it comes with a lot of cost. For example, someone who is physically challenged, who needs a digital wheelchair, is very expensive than the manual wheelchair. And then also websites that are not compatible with screen reader usage is also a barrier, because if I know how to use the screen reader and then I can't access the web page, I won't have access to information. I won't have access to what is on the website, because most website developers locally, I'm from Ghana, so I'm going to use my country as an example. Most of the news websites, the public websites, and even private websites, most of them are not accessible to screen reader users. Why? Because there are no policies regulating these website designers. So I wouldn't want to talk much. I'll just leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I think the capacity building component is also very crucial. I'd also like to bring in the conversation of legal and regulatory frameworks. I know Lynette and Ruth have also looked at this issue extensively. So Lynette, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the barriers in legislation or regulatory frameworks around trying to advance digital inclusion for persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. I hope you can hear me. Okay, I think now we're back. So yes, in terms of the legislative framework and the gaps, in terms of the legislative frameworks, I think many of us in the room have heard the phrase, people saying that we have good laws, but they're not being implemented. Well, that is true. There is a large gap in terms of lack of laws, and on the other side, lack of implementation of laws. And I think it is it's a disease that can treat itself if you have good laws. What I mean is, if the law is clear and detailed, it has adequate resourcing mechanisms, it has adequate monitoring and accountability mechanisms, simple procedures, because that's another thing. If you have a law that's complex telling you, go to office A, then go to office B to get one service, persons with disabilities, of course, already have barriers. So if you're adding barriers through complex legal procedures, it is another gap. And then also incentives and penalties. I can imagine right now, if you tell a corporation, we'll give you 5% tax if you make your services or your products accessible. All of them would dash and make things accessible. That's on the incentivization side. On the penalty side, if you say, if you don't make your services accessible, you will no longer have a license to operate a business. It's another way of incentivizing businesses and corporations to make their goods and services accessible. So on the legal side, yes, there is a challenge when it comes to lack of laws, but there is also the lack of implementation of laws, which can be addressed within the law itself.
Thank you. And I think that's a great point. It's not just about developing new laws, but making sure that they're implemented. Ruth?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Lynette, because when you're talking about implementation of the law, I just want to add this one. The enforceability of laws is very important, and it's also, we also need, the legislation shall be strengthened, not even by adding new laws, but making it enforceable. And the best way to make laws enforceable is to implement penalties. I just took some example. For example, in France, public services, online website for public services they are submitted to the accessibility requirements, and they need to publish an accessibility assessment to prove that they really implement accessibility rules. And if they do not, if they fail to that requirement, they have penalty. There is a penalty of 20,000 euros. So this is very constringent for any stakeholder that is, for example, putting in place any website, device application, mobile application, or stuff like that. So this is what we need, penalties. And also what I can add is to add to the laws standards that can outline practical and technical requirements and insights. Because, for example, most of the African countries have signed and ratified the CIPE, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but it only outlines rights of PWDs in general. But when you had a standard that can precise that this is what is required for you when you design a website, when you design a mobile application, I can have some example. For example, I don't know if you have heard about the WCAG. It's the Web Accessibility Initiative. It's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and most of the country has design standard taking account this guideline from the Web Accessibility Initiative. And this is some actions governments, administration can take to strengthen the right to accessibility for people with disabilities. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ruth. Again, if you do need the French translation, please raise your hand. And I think that also comes into play about making sure that the standards are there, the protocols are there, the frameworks are there to be in place. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Dr. Basula, would you like to add anything to this conversation about barriers when it comes to legal and regulatory frameworks?
I think the addition I want to put here is that we, persons with disabilities, must demonstrate the need for some of these legislations. What does it take to make a website accessible? If you can demonstrate that this is what you miss, I'm talking about awareness creation. You know, we may have a law, but unless you come across disability, you may not exactly appreciate the challenges that people with disabilities go through. So, in our small way, we should be able to create small groups of people that can create awareness. I'm saying this because learning from the US, people with disabilities have been negotiating with government, with the federal government, on many of the accessibility issues that have come along from as far away as the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. It has some two very interesting sections, 504 and 508. One is about giving business to people that, like, the federal government will not give you business if you don't make your technology accessible to people with disabilities. On the other hand, they're talking about private enterprises. How are they also ensuring that they have, when they have employees with disabilities, they are giving them the kind of accessibility for the technology they use in their work as much as possible. Then you can also give the example of the Adobe Foundation. Until 2005, PDF was not accessible to people with disabilities, especially people with visual impairment. So people with disabilities had to go and talk to that foundation, and they gave them clear examples of inaccessibility until people had to appreciate. even with the Windows, there was a time when a screen reader could not install on Windows. So people had to sit down with the technical departments in those companies to ensure that they cater for accessibility. So beyond putting in place a law, how can we demonstrate the need at hand, the need that we actually need some of these things to be in place? Somebody may not know the importance of a ramp until or unless he gets an accident and is unable to use the steps. But why should you pray for that? You, a wheelchair user, you go with your wheelchair and you tell people to lift you from the ground floor to the 10th floor. By the time they finish doing that, you are sure that they will understand the need for an elevator, the need for a ramp in that place. Because many people don't think that we are part of the equation. They think we are some other entity supposed to live in another world. But we are part of the mainstream. So as we yearn for better laws, we should also be able to create awareness on what is missing, and then slowly people will start appreciating that they need to give us our rights in terms of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the awareness raising component is also one of those key topics we were discussing yesterday during the Day Zero event that I mentioned. We talked a lot about the challenges and the barriers, but now I'd like to move us to talk about opportunities and success stories and how we can all work together to truly advance more inclusive and accessible digital spaces. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask each panelist to tell us about a success story. In your work, can you tell us about a successful initiative or maybe even research that has really helped inform how we can work together to build more inclusive digital spaces? What was that initiative and why was it so successful? And let's start with Owoke, please. Thank you.
Thank you again, Morgan. So from the many success stories and from some of the opportunities we had, I want to pick two of them, which I believe that this session participants can be taking some of the lessons and maybe like replicating the issue. One of the things that I was mentioning previously about the data sonification process that we have done, that is data through music interpretation, interpreting the data, the challenges, the successes and aspirations of a person with visual impairment through an accessible format, and informing decision makers, policy experts, and creating an awareness for chill future of policy experts. So we were like educating them, creating awareness with them, what the challenges, what the successes, and what the aspirations of persons with disabilities, especially the visually impaired ones, are. So through that, we are able to communicate with like early stage children who are growing and becoming the future generation, who are like taking over some of the responsibilities from ours. We are informing them to think of inclusion where like they are deciding on, while they are developing applications, while they are designing websites and doing their sort of jobs. So this is one of the most important success that we had since 2019. But I am still I'm inviting you to join me tomorrow so that we can discuss how the data sonification process works. The other thing is that through our ICT inclusion program, that higher education institutions previously, they were like inaccessible for at the Bachelor of Arts and Master of Arts program levels, ICT was like not given for persons with visual impairment. But now, at least some of the higher education institutions are like adapting some of the tools and expertise that we have been training for persons with visual impairments and trying to replicate that other than the constraints in resource and diverse human resource aspect. So I believe that we have been successful in a little bit of like creating awareness and creating the aha moment among different stakeholders that ICT can be given for a person with visual impairment. This is one of the success we had. For my Ethiopian colleagues, Ambo University is taking over the inclusive ICT program, and it might be like in the future starting the education through at the BA level. We have been in a memorandum of understanding to work together. So that is one of the bigger achievements that we had so far.
Great, thank you so much. Sarah?
A group of us came together, and there's this telco in Ghana called MTN. It's a telecommunication network, and they had brought up 2 applications, which is the My MTN app, where you can use, instead of the USSD, you can use to buy airtime, subscriptions, and all of that. And then the financial app, which is the MTN Momo app. So we realized that the application was not accessible with screen reader software, especially on iOS. So we contacted MTN, and then we spoke to them about it, and then they invited some of my friends over. So they decided to test the app there using the highest version of the iOS and the lowest version of the iOS, and also the highest version of Android and the lowest version of Android. And then they realized that it was really not accessible. So then they finally told us that, oh, this is the reason. When they developed the application, they didn't test it with the iOS operating system. So they asked us how they should go about it, because I always say that if you want to bring about solutions for persons with disability, you should bring them on board, because they are the end users of the product. So they will know how and what are the things you should do in order to make these things usable. So we gave them our ideas and our expertise, and then we realized that the application has improved. The Momo app is more accessible, and then the My MTN app is also more accessible. And then also with our first edition of the Disability Inclusive Hackathon, the team that came out second was able to bring out a prototype, which is a detachable smart device that is attached to the traditional white cane that has sensors on it that can sense obstacles. So they've improved upon it, made it more lighter, and then you can charge it. It has a switch, it has a vibrator, and it also has a sensor. So these are amongst the many things that we have worked on. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for sharing those excellent examples. And Linda, I know that the Thomson Reuters Foundation has also worked on a lot of different studies when it comes to looking at the legal and regulatory frameworks across Africa. So as we're talking about success stories, would also love to hear from you about how that study has also informed different initiatives on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan, for rephrasing the question for me. Because we don't have a current success story, we have an opportunity for a success story. So we identified a lot of gaps through the legal research that was supported by Ruth and a number of other colleagues across the continent. And those gaps really culminated to the conclusion that there's definitely room for improvement, even where within the countries the laws exist to support accessibility by persons with disabilities of ICT technologies. And there are also the other countries where there are no laws or no frameworks. So of course there's room to create a framework to support that. So in terms of the opportunities and how people can collaborate, there's definitely an opportunity to create a model law. So what does an ideal law look like? I liked what Ruth mentioned about penalties. There's definitely the other angle, which is incentives. How do we make sure that the laws are strong enough, they are self-implementing, as opposed to a law that's there and you say it's good, there's no financing for the bodies, there's no authority in charge of looking at the accessibility. So I think in terms of an opportunity for a success story, as Africa, as the AU, I think we could create a model law of what accessibility looks like. And not just the legal side. Dr. Busula talked about standards and guidelines. So there's the law, and then there's what will guide the developers of these technologies, so that we're addressing both the legal angle, but also the development side, the technology side.
Thank you very much. Ruth, would you care to add to that?
So in terms of opportunity, my remark will be in terms of opportunities. Our current president is intending the Senegal to reach the digital autonomy. And in the recent political context in Senegal, we believe that civil society can lobby to push the adoption of standards and rights. So if we combine the fact that the president is wishing that the Senegal will reach the digital autonomy, and that the civil society can also lobby, we believe that if we need of the accessibility for ITCs, accessibility to ICTs for people with disabilities, civil society can lobby and then reach the point where standards, more practical and technical requirements, rules is being implementing in the country. So I just think that hopefully the Senegal will be improving and strengthen the accessibility for persons with disabilities to internet and communication technology. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Busula?
I think for us, I can talk about two initiatives. One came to persons with disabilities almost accidentally. In 2003, the Uganda Communications Commission started something called the Rural Community Development Fund, and this was intended to create public-private partnerships in terms of ICT, so that these partnerships would take technology to the most rural areas of the country, including computers, the internet. And at some point, when I started doing my PhD, I challenged those people in that commission that how many projects have been carried out by people with disabilities or have been carried out to benefit people with disabilities specifically. And incidentally, there was none. So from 2003 to 2010, 2011, there was nothing for people with disabilities. So when I challenged them, they did research, and they found out that there's a lot they could do for people with disabilities. And from that point, they started devising ways of reaching out to people with disabilities, especially by setting aside some money to buy the specialized equipment that would be taken to different schools, and to ensure that people with disabilities could use that technology. So as we speak, even today, there was a workshop on digital rights for persons with disabilities. There was an advocacy workshop that had been arranged by Uganda Communications Commission. I was supposed to speak at that workshop, but now I'm here and I could not. So there is a lot that we have benefited. At least now government is aware of our need, and accidentally again, that mixed up with an initiative by UNESCO and UNICEF to ensure that information is made accessible, especially for people with visual impairment and people with hearing impairment. So, a number of textbooks were transcribed into Braille for about 20 primary schools and about 5 secondary schools. So that initiative has taken shape. The only challenge is that there is limited use of that technology because many people's abilities are not trained on the effective use of the technology. But that is now a secondary challenge which we shall deal with. The other initiative is largely a personal one, where we set up a company, an assistive technology company. So we endeavor to look for technology wherever it is. And within that company, we also give small trainings to people with disabilities, especially people with visual impairment, on how to use some of these gadgets, like the refreshable braille displays, how to navigate and use the various keystrokes in Windows, in Microsoft Office, how to use the internet, and slowly the community of users of ICT is growing, because as we speak now, we have a small group that we started on WhatsApp where people can ask questions and we give them specialized responses to solve some of their hitches in terms of ICT. That group is now over 50 people actively involved in that group. So that's another success. This organization has been in place for about 5 years now, and we really still hope that it will grow to another level as people like and enjoy to use technology a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's another great example of looking at those success stories and opportunities as well. I'd like to just ask one more question before we open it up for questions from the audience, and that is around the topic of engaging with diverse stakeholder groups. So yesterday during our Day Zero event, we talked about trying to break down those silos, different initiatives working on topics around digital inclusion, but there's more opportunities for engagement. Also, there's opportunities for engaging with different stakeholder groups, including local private sector, civil society, media, even government. So my question to all of you would be to tell us more about how you think diverse stakeholder groups, including, as I said, local private sector, civil society, media, government, et cetera, can better work together collaboratively to really try to advance the inclusion of persons with disabilities online. And I do have one more brief announcement. We do have a car that needs to be moved, and if you have a car that's parked outside, please come see the lady in the purple dress who has the license plate number for that. Thank you. All right, okay?
Thank you again. So yeah, one of the big issues that we need to deliberate on, I believe, is meaningful stakeholder engagement. We're like advancing towards having a meaningful stakeholder engagement rather than simply calling and gathering some stakeholders around a space and then talking some issues, but in reality we didn't sometimes meaningfully engage persons with disabilities who are the primary stakeholders of the initiatives or the actions that we want to do and the objectives that we want to meet. So we do believe, and of course we understand that a meaningful engagement of all stakeholders, including the media, the academic institutions, public institutions, lawmakers, and civil society organizations is important so that our alliance and our voice will be very high. We can make bigger noise than like individually that we have been doing some of our advocacy or disability empowerment programs. So the meaningful engagement, not in the form of like ticking the box, is one of the important things that we need to consider while working with diverse or multi-stakeholder program areas. So in Ethiopia, currently what we need is like an alliance, a meaningful engagement of all the stakeholders to revise some of the tax policy for an assistive ICT technology device, for encouraging innovation, for the development of some inclusive ICT products, and somehow what we lack in like facilitating the platform to have a space for designers, for website and application developers, and some of the policymakers to work together and to have some user testing experience so that we can have the product that we need that's an inclusive ICT product. So a meaningful engagement of the multi-stakeholder can help us to achieve this, and this is what we are looking for. And we want to join hands in our brothers and sisters in other African countries so that we could have the chance for a meaningful engagement of stakeholders.
Great, thank you. Sarah?
Oh, okay, thank you. So I believe that collaborating with these stakeholders, you know, some of these stakeholders do not even have any idea about matters that has to do with disability. So educating them, letting them know our needs, coming together with them, collaborating with them, networking with media personnel, so that when these things are going on, they can put it out there in the media space, like on radio and television. Also engaging with governments. When governments wants to bring about a policy, we should make sure that we are involved in those policies to make them all inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynette?
I think I'll just take it a step further from what Sarah has said. In terms of collaboration, I don't think we really take a step back to consider what our best offering is when it comes to collaborating. So we are not all bringing the same expanders who are looking for opportunities to support impactful initiatives, but because we are not discussing, you know, what is your best offering, and I think that should be part of the conversation. And also in terms of identification of, we do well when it comes to identifying gaps, but we don't do enough beyond that. So looking at how to address those gaps we've identified and making actionable goals. For instance, from a convening like this, it shouldn't just be a conversation that ends here and then we say the same thing next year. We have, as I said, an opportunity to create model laws, push for better standards and guidelines. So if we have actionable goals and then collaborate, bringing all our strengths together, so everyone puts their best foot forward to address those gaps that we've identified.
Great, thank you so much. Ruth?
Thank you very much. I will talk about, Sarah said that people with disabilities shall be involved in the discussions, and this is what the convention, the UN CIPD require for the states. The state may not, the state may include persons with disabilities when they are discussing the adoption or laws and standards and all, because they are the best person to know what they need, what is best for her, what is better, for them. And I will also talk about, in Senegal, we need to take into account something. Even if we are in the best digital world and all the devices and ICTs are accessible, there will still remain the literacy issue, because people with disabilities may not have access to training, opportunities to learn and to develop skills to help them to navigate the digital world. So even if everything is accessible, all devices are accessible, someone, because of the lack of literacy and then the digital illiteracy, such accessibility will be pointless for most of the person, for example, in Senegal. So this is something that must be taken in account, because it's pointless to make devices accessible for someone that cannot even read. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Basula?
For me, I want to say that some of the areas where we need to collaborate, we have to make a business case for some of these issues if we want to be included. For example, if you go to the telecom companies and demonstrate the inaccessibility of some of their services, and you discuss the solutions, they may also have to realize that if they don't have you as part of their market, there's something to lose. For instance, I would give an example of those accessibility indicators that we developed with CIPESA. When we tried to test them out on the different telecom companies, we realized many of them were really not accessible to people with disabilities. And then, so something had to be done. Otherwise, we would cry exclusion. Then right now, you'll find that in my country, many blind people may not be able to use an ATM machine. But then something very small can be done, and the ATM machine is made accessible. So, because you know, we have issues of signature, how do you sign for your money? And then we say, but look, if you give me the digital side of this thing, I would not need even a signature. I would just need to access my money in this way, and there would be no issues. So many of them are coming on board around that thing. And then also we have other issues, especially with the government. Like, for example, we've had the problem that many children with the hearing impairment are not performing well in their primary education. So it came out as a glaring fact that something had to be done to improve their performance. And some of the solutions would be found in ICT. And the same goes for people with visual impairment, students. They don't perform well in mathematics. And so initiatives have to be created around ensuring that some of these issues are discussed and a solution is found. So we normally would want to engage on some of these issues that are real for everybody. And when you don't act, people with disability will conclude that you are heartless, you're a bad person, and you will not want to be on that side. So when we take to them some of these issues, slowly we are getting some reaction that is positive, and eventually I think we should be in position to have everybody included in the digital world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those were all wonderful interventions about stakeholder engagement, and I also love the point about the business case, making sure that we're clear about those incentives for all stakeholders to engage on this issue. We only have a few minutes left, so I wanted to open the floor for questions from the audience. If you could please raise your hand if you have a question. I would kindly ask that you please introduce yourself with your affiliation and also briefly describe your personal appearance for those with visual impairments. And I will get a microphone over to you. Let's start in the back there.
Thank you so much. I'm a parliamentarian from Zimbabwe, and I'm a champion on disability. So under the Parliament of Zimbabwe, this year we launched the Disability Caucus. I wanted to hear from the panelists how they see the value of parliamentarians in promoting their own advocacy work, especially from a policy making and legislative point of view, also for their parliaments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? We'll take a few. Yes, over here, Nicodemus.
Yes, my name is Nicodemus Nyakundi. I come from Kenya, and I work under Kiktanet as a digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. I have two questions. One is for Doug, right? If I pronounce your name right. My concern is that you mentioned that access to assistive technology is limited to people in the rural areas. And I'm really interested to know maybe some of the few factors contributing to that. Because you see, we usually have this perception that rural areas are always poor. But there are countries whereby the rural areas is feeding the towns. So we want to know, like, what are these factors that are contributing to that? The second question is to Lynette and a contribution from Doctor on, like, why do we sometimes have parallel laws when it comes to disabilities? Let's say we have an ICT regulation policy, it is enacted, then later they come and sit down now, they say, let's create one for disability. Why do we have such scenarios other than creating a single inclusive policy? Thank you.
Thanks. So a member of APNIC, but also the chairperson for African Parliamentary Forum for Persons with Disability. I am 83 kilograms. That's the best I know. But chocolate also in color. I just have a few questions. One, this one goes to all of them. I would like to know if there are you addressed in litigation issues and other ways. And then also, I want to thank my doctor, very proud of you. We always engage through NODIPO. And NODIPO is a union in Uganda that has really worked with the forum to see to it that advocacy for PWDs in Uganda is heard of. There are issues to do with assistive technologies, which cuts across, I believe, to all the African countries as a barrier. And I don't know whether we are trying to focus on how we can make these assistive devices or technologies available before we can create awareness, before we can train. Do we have these devices available, accessible? If I, as a member of parliament, maybe in my own country, I can still fail to get just a mere wheelchair for my disabled person, then I go to mobilize the community, I go to mobilize the PWDs to create awareness of disability and the challenges. How do we make this available to them? Because me, I'm looking at the rural. My brother said we feed the rural people, feed the urban. But to some extent, they are marginalized. They are marginalized, they do not have a sustainable income that provides opportunities for them to access these devices. So we need to look into that. Most of the time when I am talking about disability, sometimes they call me in my country, in parliament, they call me disabled girl because I'm so much passionate about it. And when I tell them I'm the vice chair, they ask me, where is your disability? And sometimes I also make jokes with them. I tell them, I'm a woman, my disability is my breast. It has fallen. So, because I don't want them to continue bothering me. That's how I make jokes with them. But anyway, nonetheless. So we need to try to bring on board and walk along. I bought my crutches when I had an accident in 2021 in the bathroom. Even now I'm limping because I had an accident in the bathroom. Mine is about bathroom tiles. So for the 6 months that I was on crutches, it has not been easy. It has not been easy. And we know we are all candidates. At any time, you are a candidate for disability. And that is why in my entire life, my advocacy is on the vulnerable persons, the older persons, the persons with disability, children with the sickle cells, children with the HIV/AIDS infections. That has been my area in my entire life. Refugees, because I grew up in the camp, in the IDP camp during the war. So we are all prone. But my last question that goes to all of us who are here is, are we trying to mitigate the cause of disability in each and every country that we come from? That is peace and security. How are we contributing to peace and security? Because in the IDP camps where I carried my research, I talked about my research this morning in the conference room. Most of the disability has been because of the war. The hands cut off because of the bullets, the legs cut off, the ears are off, they are blind. All this because of the wars that they have gone through. So what is our contribution to maintain peace in our different countries that we come from? Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorables and also participants, for those interesting questions. We are a little short on time, so what I'm going to do is just ask each of our panelists to comment on any of the questions that were raised during the Q&A. So just to summarize, there was a question about the role of parliamentarians in this process. Have you seen examples of their engagement, or what are some ideas around maybe further engagement with parliamentarians on this issue? Owoke, there was a question about rural areas and the connection with persons with disabilities. Lynette, there is also a question for you about ICT policies and the differences between having sort of one big policy on digital inclusion versus several. There were also questions around assistive technologies. Are they truly available for everyone? And also on cyber harassment and bullying, to what extent can we work together to mitigate those issues? So if I could just ask each panelist to comment on whichever question you feel compelled to answer, we'll just do a rapid fire going down the line with the answers. Thank you. Oh, okay.
So thank you again, Morgan, and thank you very much for the member of parliament and those who raised your important questions for us. I think, including myself, we all understand and believe that the value of parliamentarians is an immense contribution for the advancement of inclusive development and inclusion of persons with disabilities. But unfortunately, when it comes to Ethiopia, I think you can imagine, at the morning I was jealous when the member of parliament were like introduced by the moderator of the forum. Either they didn't respond to you or they are not willing to come and join this freedom of internet, forum on internet freedom in Africa. So this might be an indication. We had a lot of efforts contacting them, like once upon a time we do an assessment and we identify like there are some policies that need a design, and there are policies that need to, inclusive policies that need to be properly executed for the inclusion of persons with disabilities. And we identified some policies which needs revision. because the technology is changing and the world is like growing, and globalization is also here. And currently there is also AI in the crypto world. We are very much concerned enough. So there are some policy revision issues, but we didn't find them. There are also issues that we need to change, but still we are unable to find them. So, like, you can imagine how the problem can be extended to the rural communities. This is an indication from the engagement stage. It's like very hard to meet a member of parliament to discuss about inclusion of person with disability. So when it comes to the assistive devices, imagine the economic situation that we are in. Imagine the price of the technology, how it's like growing up and skyrocketing. Imagine the level of economic situation of persons with disabilities. I mean, it's like very interconnected. So as you can imagine, a person with disability in Ethiopia has like triple challenges. One is the disability that the socio-ecological environment has creating. The other is like the inaffordability and inaccessibility of the assistive devices. And then there is also poverty. So this is a bigger challenge when it comes to the rural community in Ethiopia. So that's like, you don't imagine even, you don't compare with the capital in Addis, let alone the rural community, because they are very far. It needs some resource, additional and extra effort to reach out to them. Persons with disabilities in Addis Ababa have been experiencing a lot of challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah?
I'm just going to keep it brief. In the case of members of parliament, it's sometimes difficult to have a conversation with them. Even when we have programs where we talk about things like this, they only come, and then if they have to give a speech, they give a speech. They don't sit through the entire program. I understand they are busy, but these ones are also very important issues. But they don't sit through the program to know what we have on board and even understand what is going on. When they come, they give their speech, and then they don't even sit for 5 minutes. After giving their speech, they walk out. I've noticed that a lot of times. It's happened when we had the recent Internet Governance Forum in Ghana, the main edition, and then, you know, the member of Deputy Minister for Communication, I'm sorry, but I have to say this. The Deputy Minister for Communication came, gave a speech, you know, the key people that need to really listen to most of the things that, because they are the ones that represent the people. Members of parliament represent the people in parliament. So they should know the needs and wants of the people and also persons with disability. But if you come for a program only to deliver a speech and you say, oh, I'm busy, I have to zoom into another meeting, how will you know what we need? How will you know the steps to take? Because you are not the person with disability. You might have an idea, but you also need to hear from the person with disabilities perspective. Because, for example, I can have a chef. I tell the chef that I want food. I don't want too much pepper because I have this kind of sickness. Do it this way, do it this way. The chef is the best person to cook the food, but also the chef needs to listen to what I want and how I want the food to be prepared. So if the member of parliament is my voice in parliament and does not even have the time to listen to me, then I don't know how else I can engage with you, because you come deliver a speech and you are out the door. So that is also a problem. If members of parliament can sit through the program and listen to the sessions. And also most of the time, the disability sessions become like a side meal. I'm actually happy that with this event, it was inside the main opening session. I was very, very excited when I got to find out that that's how it is. So that is what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynette, please.
Yes, so I'm happy to comment on the two questions about parliament and lawmaking. I think in Kenya, one of the things we do well is in terms of representation. All the new legislation post the constitution we currently have specifies that every board, every authority that is created has to have a representative from marginalized groups. So it will say a representative who is female and other marginalized communities. So I think in Kenya there is fair engagement through parliament. In terms of duplication of laws, there is a running joke in the Law Society of Kenya that it's a job creation opportunity. So you create 5 bodies to deal with one issue, water. All of those bodies will have a board or authority, and there will be employees there. So there is that, but beyond the joke, it has created a lot of inefficiency because when your roles overlap, there tends to be a push and pull. Where does mine stop and where does the next body start? So that there is also an attempt to try and merge the bodies. You've seen that from the austerity measures that the president is trying to implement, trying to merge the bodies that are having overlapping duties. The other one is on assistive technologies. I think one thing we're really missing out on is the environment is a sexy topic right now, right? So ESG, the environment, climate, people are investing resources there, one. Companies, you cannot book a ticket without the airline telling you we are only emitting X amount in carbon. They're literally marketing that they're saving the planet. If we do the same when it comes to inclusivity, whether it's women, whether it's persons with disabilities, and look at the S in ESG, making inclusivity sexy, I think we can make assistive technology cheaper because everyone will be saying, we're investing X amount in research and development. We're investing X amount to make the assistive technology cheaper. So it becomes, even from a corporation perspective, something that companies are happy to market themselves as.
Thank you, Lynette. Ruth?
Thank you very much. And when I just listen to what Lynette is saying, I just remember that Awoke was talking about meaningful engagement for stakeholders, because to make ICTs cheaper, some may decide to lose something. And the lack of engagement, it's causing that the ICTs are not affordable for persons with disability. And I will also talk about cyber harassment. And this is the other side of the coin of accessibility to information, to ICTs, actually. And internet can be harmful for everybody, but unfortunately, we do not have the time to talk about it fully. But in Africa, there's a lack of legislation to protect people from internet that can be harmful to them. So how much more for persons with disabilities? And these are part of the topic that is not taken seriously enough, because people minimize the impact, the negative impact of cyber harassment on people. And this is, unfortunately, that's the reality in African countries.
Thank you, Ruth. And Dr. Basula?
How do we ensure availability of assistive technology? I think there are several initiatives. The statistics are not good, but we can still try, because we say that only 10% of the people that need assistive technology get the kind of assistive technology they need. And most of these who don't get that technology are in developing countries. But then, as people of authority, we should be taking opportunity of some of these projects, like the Global Assistive Technology Project by World Health Organization. We now have initiatives around 3D printing. We can try that. can look around for people willing to donate or used equipment in terms of assistive technology. But again, when you go deeper into ICT, there are those big companies that are willing to negotiate with governments to ensure that some of these technologies are made cheaper. For example, if you are going to buy the JAWS screen reader as a single user, you will need to pay something like $1,400. But if you get a multiple user license, it would be as cheap as $150. So we need some of these initiatives to take shape in our countries. And you know, a government can offer maybe to buy a number of licenses for maybe a number of years. And by the time that goes out, a lot of people will have benefited and they will not want to go back. Then this issue of rural, taking technology to the rural areas. As I said, you don't have to do it in isolation as people with disabilities. We have to create synergies. For example, if there's no telephone in a particular village and you advocate for telephone to reach that village, whether wireless or what, inevitably, some of these things will also come, like the internet will have to come along. If you say we need to have a bank in this rural area and somebody gets that initiative into that place, inevitably, the easier thing would be to bring an ATM machine nearby or to bring the service with some of these apps that can easily be used by anybody, including people with disabilities. So it's very important when we are talking about public-private partnerships. Where are we as people with disabilities? Are we joining up with others to drum up the issues that we are talking about or not? So these are some of the initiatives that we need to take seriously, and then we shall be included. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for those really helpful responses, and also Dr. Basula for your comments. I do recognize that we are out of time, so I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for really sort of diving in with us on those successful approaches, opportunities, thinking about how we can engage with one another to really advance digital inclusion for persons with disabilities. We talked a lot about partnerships, capacity building, awareness raising, and I would just encourage us all to continue the conversation over the tea break. Tea and coffee is outside of the room. I was also asked to remind everyone that there is a set of sessions taking place at 4 p.m., including from the Meta Oversight Board, TOR, GIZ African Union, also APC. So please do take a look at the agenda, and we'll see you in the next sessions. Thank you so much to our audience as well, and also to CIPESA. Thanks, everyone.